Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Melissa Lazaro. I'm the Director of Marketing here at MindPrint Learning. We're so glad that you've joined us for today's webinar, Transforming Differentiated Instruction Through a Strengths-Based Approach. Today's webinar is brought to you by MindPrint Learning and the Modern Classrooms Project. And in case you're new to the Science of Learning series, I just want to tell you a little bit about MindPrint. MindPrint Learning is the only strengths-based MTSS solution empowering teachers and students with learning strategies matched to their unique cognitive strengths. And I want to tell you a little bit about our partner today. The Modern Classrooms Project is a non-for-profit that empowers educators to build classrooms that respond to every student's needs. And what I personally love about the Modern Classrooms Project is that it offers free virtual courses for teachers, mentor programs for teachers, and partners with districts and schools across the globe. They have a mission to make teachers happier. I mean, who doesn't want to be happier? And students gain the mastery that they need to succeed. So I'll be introducing our guest speakers in just a minute, but I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items with you all. So moving on, today's webinar will be recorded, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. Next week, you're going to receive an email that has all of the great resources that we've shared today, including email addresses and things for you to learn more information about MindPrint or about Modern Classrooms Project. So we'll also be sending you the recording in that same email. Vicki Algieri is with us today. She's our Senior Director of Learning at MindPrint Learning, and she'll be fielding all the questions. So any questions that you have throughout the webinar, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A. This discussion is going to be about 30 minutes long, and then we'll save about 15 minutes towards the end for Q&A. And if there's more questions, we'll just keep answering them, and you hop off when you need to. But we want to make sure that you have all the information that you need before you leave today. We are fortunate to have a terrific panel. We have Andrea Mayer who's a 5th grade teacher over in Wisconsin at Stanley Boyd Elementary. Leah, if you want to, Andrea, if you want to wave hi, yeah. And then we have Leah Frederick, who's a 4th grade math and science teacher at Lewis Myers Elementary School in Pennsylvania. We have Robert Burnett, who is the co-founder and chief program officer at the Modern Classrooms Project, and Ifrat Saida, who's our manager of professional learning at MindPrint Learning. Today, we're going to listen and learn from 2 elementary school educators who used a strengths-based approach to increase student engagement. And before we get going and hearing from both Leah and Andrea, I think it's important to just learn a little bit about, like, what is Modern Classrooms Project about? Why did MindPrint engage in a partnership with them? And where did Andrea and Leah come into this picture? From a long time ago with the Modern Classrooms Project and more recently with MindPrint Learning, because I think that's really going to help you understand the lens of which their perspective and experiences and how they are planning on tackling the next school year with the new knowledge that they have. So without further ado, Robert, if you could take it away. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you so much, Melissa. I appreciate it. Thank you to all of you for spending your time here. The main focus will be the teacher's experience here, but I wanted to just take a couple minutes to talk about Modern Classrooms. Melissa, if you could just click through the animations on this slide, that's perfect. So Modern Classrooms is a nonprofit organization founded by teachers. Me and my co-founder, we were math teachers in DC public schools. And our goal is to empower educators all over the world. We have trained through our mentorship program over 10,000 educators, through our free course, even more. We've trained educators in 2,000 plus schools, and we also credential teacher leaders who are implementing our model effectively, and we help them empower their peers. Our mission, Melissa, if you could just click one more time, is to help any teacher anywhere meet every learner's needs. When I say that, you can go to the next slide, sorry. When I say that, what do I mean by meet every learner's needs? Well, I think about being a teacher in a class, and I think about some students in my class are on grade level, they're ready to learn. If you click again, there are some students in your class who have already learned this. It's too easy, they're bored. There are some students, if you click again, who have gaps in their learning. It's too hard, they're lost. And then there may be some students who are absent and wonder what they're missing. And as a teacher, your goal is to try to meet each of these learners' needs, but it's very difficult to do this if you're giving one lesson at a time. And so the teacher feels like, Melissa, the teacher feels like I'm a failure. I certainly felt this way, and I and my co-founder founded Modern Classrooms Project to give teachers a way around doing this. Here is basically our model on the next slide. So we start with blended instruction. We replace the teacher standing at the board delivering a lecture with videos that the teacher creates that are very short and focused, so students can access direct instruction on their own pace, anytime in school or at home. Next, we help teachers set up self-pacing, so students really have the time they need to move through learning sequences. It's not for a whole year, but maybe for a couple days at a time or a week at a time. Students move at their own pace, so if they're ready to move fast, they move fast. If they need more time, they have the time they need. And then finally, our approach is mastery-based. We don't want students moving from one lesson to the next until they've shown they understand it. This prevents learning gaps from forming, and it helps make sure students really build foundational skills. Of course, if we want to use this approach to meet every learner's needs, we have to understand what those needs actually are. Just one more, Melissa. So, it's easy to say, understand students' needs, really hard to do, especially in a rigorous way and in large classes. And so that's why we partnered with MindPrint, thinking we have all these teachers who are interested in this approach to teaching. We know it solves a problem that they face, which is the diversity of needs in their class, but we need to give them tools to understand what their learners really need. That's where MindPrint comes in, and I'm happy to hand it over to you, Efrat.
Thanks, Robert, for, I think, the greatest segue one can ask for. Hi, everyone. My name is Ifrat, and I am the manager of professional learning here at MindPrint. So I'll kind of take over from where Robert left off and talk a little about our partnership over the last couple of months, including, of course, talking about our pilot program, and then maybe just adding a little bit more context to MindPrint and the work that we do, especially for some of our newer webinar attendees. Ultimately, though, I too want to keep it brief so we can hear more from Andrea and Leah. I think we can all agree the real reason we're all here today. But before I give you a summary of the pilot program and talk a little about the who and the what, I wanted to talk about the why. So Melissa, we can shift to that next slide. Perfect. And just think about what were the goals of the pilot? What were we hoping to accomplish? And like Robert mentioned, I think we know a few things, right? I think we know a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work when it comes to learning. We know our students are unique, and we know they have different needs. We know that we need to differentiate instruction based on those different needs. But maybe what we don't know is how to get to know what they are. And not just that, how to also get to know students' strengths and use those strengths. And that's where MindPrint comes in. So MindPrint acts as a tool for teachers to gain those insights that aren't easily observable, and use them to plan for differentiated instruction and ultimately to increase teacher and student self-efficacy, among other things. And so when we talk about these insights, I do want to talk a little about how it's different from what you already have access to. So on the next slide, it's not going to surprise you to see some familiar pieces of data. Perfect. You, of course, have significant data around academics, right? That's what your students know and will learn. You have measures of academic performance like exit ticket data, assessment data, homework and project grades, one might argue, too much academic data. You also have significant data around their behavior and well-being. So your observations of the student, attendance and discipline data, student surveys, and so on. But what you might not have access to is the data that MindPrint provides, or the cognitive data around how students learn and master the content, and why you might be seeing some of the behaviors that you are. Data that sometimes only available through long and expensive screeners. And even then, screeners that you might not be able to get or to access without referrals. But so that cognitive data really is just there to fill in another piece of the puzzle. And to like Robert's points, think about how we can deeply understand who our students are and what they truly need. So you've heard me say cognitive data a few times. And so I just want to go over what we mean when we talk about that cognitive data about students' learning strengths and needs. So on the next, oh, perfect. You'll see this is our learning pyramid, and it shows the skills that drive learning. And they include students' complex reasoning skills, or how they take in and understand information best, their executive function skills, or how they apply and transfer what they understood, and then their long-term memory skills, or how they store and then later remember that information. This is just at a glance. We won't dive much deeper into the learning pyramid today. I know we have past webinars in which we have, so really please feel free to visit our YouTube channel. And then at the end, we'll have our email addresses, so you can always reach out to us to learn more. But the visual is just here to add a little bit more context into what the MindPrint assessment measures. The data that follows that assessment talks about where students fall in these domains and the skills within the domains. And so with that context, I think we can go back to the pilot and get into the who and the what. And so within this pilot, we had 8 teachers, and we have 2 of them. We are so fortunate to have 2 of them with us today, and 1 school psychologist, and that is across the country and in Portugal, which is really cool. So they were able to take the assessment for themselves first and better understand their own learning strengths and how that impacts their approach to teaching or working with students. They received training on the science of learning, and that's where we do go more in depth into the learning pyramid and into those cognitive domains and skills that you just saw. And then teachers were able to then test all of their students, receive personalized reports and recommendations and strategies for them, and then get access to our cognitive and academic dashboards where, and I know Andrea and Leah are going to talk a little bit more about this, but where they can filter and sort students by their strengths and needs and instructional areas. And while that's great, from there, they continue to receive coaching and support on how to actually transfer this data to their classrooms. And that's similar to what we might do at scale with a school or a district. But so that's what they're here today to share, these 2 truly incredible teachers, their experience with MindPrint and how they've used the data and the resources for their students this year and in planning for next. And so I do just want to take a moment to thank them both for their time, not just today, but throughout this pilot. It was so obvious to me how Andrea and Leah care so deeply about their students. And so I am so excited for you all to catch a glimpse of that today. And so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Andrea.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Marr, and I am a 5th grade teacher in Wisconsin. So you're going to enjoy my Wisconsin accent all the next few minutes here. This is my 14th year teaching, and I teach all subjects. So I have a self-contained 5th grade classroom. Really happy to be here today to share just a bit of my experience using MindPrint in conjunction with how I manage my classroom, which is with that modern classrooms approach, which Robert was talking about earlier. However, with that said, even if you're currently not using the modern classrooms model, I think that there's going to be some things you can pick up on today that will really connect to the work you do within your classroom, no matter what age level or subject level. So we're going to jump in. So the first thing I want to talk about is just some typical challenges that I know I experience from year to year, but I'm thinking you might also. And one thing I love about a new school year is just getting to know my new group of students. You know, I've always loved that challenge of getting to know my students. How do they learn best? And really what motivates them to do their best. And as I'm sure you have experienced, you know, some years I figure that out a lot quicker than others. And sometimes there's even a student or two that this saddens me, but you know, you just never really truly figure out and you feel bad about that, no matter how tirelessly you work. And with those tougher students, you know, I'm always thinking, man, if I could just get into their brain, see how they're processing this or where they're losing track, you know, this would really help me out. You know, that's a wish and a dream that I think many teachers have, but not really a reality. And if you have the privilege of teaching some older students, sometimes they can communicate to you where they're breaking down and what's happening, but many times they don't even know. So when I saw this opportunity for MindPrint come across, I thought, hey, maybe that's going to give me the answers I need. And so I just jumped at the chance to participate. And then my team of 3 other 5th grade teachers, they were all on board as well. And so we made this an entire 5th grade initiative. Now, a big thing for us as 5th grade teachers is that transitioning to middle school. We're the last of their elementary grade level before they make that jump. And there's just a lot of changes with how they learn, how they receive information. For example, many of our curricular resources, they have workable books where students can just fill in the blanks. But in middle school, they have to look at a textbook, report their answers on a separate piece of paper. Or originally, we are self-contained, right? We have everything within the classroom organizationally that they need. But in middle school, they start switching classes. They need to mentally log. Okay, what did we do yesterday? What do I need from one day to the next? And unfortunately, there's also some larger class sizes. So probably a little bit more distracting behaviors, less one-on-one support, and all of those things that just come with having to service more students at one time. So this transition is just really always a big concern for us. And we want to prepare them for that next step and we want them to be successful. And then finally, the biggest challenge that my team talked about was just making our students more metacognitive and having them more in the driver's seat, having that mindset that they're in charge of their learning too. We wanted them to be more reflective on their learning process and just analyzing whether or not they truly learned the content. We wanted them to hold themselves more responsible for knowing or not knowing, because we tend to see a lot of what I might call those checkbox students. They want to know what they have to do. They do it. They check it off mentally as done. And then they don't really look back at it, you know, for quality or even care to retain what they actually just did. So students would seem confident, oh, I completed everything, but they wouldn't even focus on if their answer was reasonable or not. And so we really wanted that reflective learner piece to be a focus for us as we moved forward, having our 5th grade students take this MindPrint assessment. So you can go to that next slide. I do want to give a quick shout out to IFRAD and the MindPrint team. They did an excellent job in preparing us for giving this assessment. We got to take the assessment ourselves and then we knew exactly what the students were experiencing and we got to learn more about our own brain. So that was pretty cool. But after the results were analyzed, we were sent a beautiful spreadsheet and that's referenced on the slide here. It's the color coded with the green and the orange and the blue. And this was based off of strengths and weaknesses, and we could easily sort how they did into categories like homerooms. I took that information and then I made an at a glance sheet, which you can see down at the bottom of the slide. And I took every MindPrint category, so all those cognitive things science things that Ifrit was showing you in the pyramid, and I separated them into the different ranges, the support range, the lower than expected range, the strength range, and so on. So I could just see on one piece of paper all the students in my class and where they fell with each of those areas. And I saw some obvious trends, but then this information really helped me with my instruction, planning my instruction and my groupings. So for example, I would avoid grouping students who have verbal memory struggles together. So much of our class, as we know, is dependent on that verbal memory. We're giving a lot of verbal directions. And so it's good to know which one of my students needed those supports. And like Albert and Kelly, I would have maybe typically put together in a group, but knowing that they showed up together on that visual memory and needing support, now I know that that partnership probably isn't a good partnership. And so that was really helpful when it came to my instructional groupings. For independent group work, though, I would try to pair those strengths together with strengths or expected range students who needed support, because then I could tailor what I did with that group to their strengths, and I could put those different scaffolds in place for different areas of support. For example, if I was doing a reading group, some groups did better with written word summary, while others might do better with more of a mind map, words and picture type summary based on their learning profile here. And now I'm not saying that we should shift our expectations, right? An expectation is still an expectation. I want all of my students to be able to write a written summary. However, I knew now what I could put in place, and that mind map picture support could be just a scaffolding or a next step. And they could use that to help with their memory later on to aid in writing that summary. Our 5th grade team, we meet weekly. And when we meet, we call it student learning teams. Usually it's just our 5th grade team, but it can include other different people that work with our students from day to day. And when we meet, we really focus on using data to drive our decision making. And I know a lot of schools have these put in place. Lots of times, we're looking at our assessment data or that academic data that Ifrat was talking about. And our SMART goal this year, we were looking at phonics data. So we were really heavily focused on that. However, after we met with Ifrat and saw the trends within our entire grade level, then we started to make some data-driven decisions based on our MindPrint results, because it was very evident to our team that our whole grade level really needed help in the flexible thinking. And I think that's a pretty common trend with younger learners or even older learners. A lot of us like to be right a lot of the time, right? And so to be able to be more flexible with our thinking is a really high quality that's going to help them to be successful later on in middle school and even beyond school. So together, we went to the MindPrint Toolbox, which is just a large resource bank, and we looked up strategies to help with weaker flexible thinking. And we found some nice handouts for every category, and they were called like how adults can support, verbal memory or flexible thinking and things like that. And we even use those for parent-teacher conferences to help parents and adults in their lives, give them more information of areas that they could help their own child. But from that list of strategies, then we chose one that we thought would benefit our students. And for example, the strategy to help with flexible thinking was, when you get stuck, write down everything you know. Or another one was, take a pause and use positive self-talk. So each of us took different strategies and implemented them in different ways just to have some data-driven discussions. I chose to make mine a whole class goal, and we would check in on it each day. I charted it in the beginning or in the front of the room, and we worked it into, part of our routine. And some days there were opportunities to use the strategy and other days there weren't. But the important thing was that it was visual. We were discussing it regularly, and we were just keeping that strategy in mind. I have some high achievers in my room that would shut down just at the risk of failure. They didn't want to try hard things because, they might actually fail. And so this strategy really helped keep them engaged, because it was focusing on, hey, I might not know this one little piece, but look at all these things I do know. So they were able to focus on what they knew, and then that just fired connections to help them persevere in solving their problems. So we charted that strategy and used it more regularly, and it helps my whole class with their flexible thinking. If you get the opportunity to dig into any of these strategies that MindPrint gives you, you're going to notice and appreciate that these aren't outlandish to implement. They're really easy for kids to understand, and they take little to no time and no money really to implement them at all, which is great, because how often in education do you get that, right? So we have a whole class strategy that then I ask students to set a goal around, an individual strategy as well. And to do this, some students, or all the students, they got to explore their student profiles, and those helped them determine how to tap into their strengths more. And I asked my students to choose just one strategy, because by the time, if I'm being honest, by the time we got to this, it was a little later in the year. But I gave them the option then of taking a weak area that they have and trying to strengthen it using one of the strategies, or to choose an area that they were already strong in and figure out how they can use that area more often and in their learning in different content areas. Well, all my students, they were pretty into this. They were pretty invested. And I think it was because they had really never taken an assessment that looked like this before. You know, it kind of felt like a game, not a test. And it gave them information about themselves and how their brain worked best. And it was also pretty cool that NASA astronauts take the same assessment. So that was a good selling point for them. But one particular student pops out to mind that I want to share with you and highlight him a little bit. He was always a great kid, and he was kind of disengaged with school. He would be that kid that would, you know, do what you asked him to do, but he'd give a sarcastic remark here and there. He didn't really seem to be all in. He would complain about stuff and be like, oh, do we really have to do this? And be like, well, did I ask you? Then yeah, right? So he was just that checkbox kid that I mentioned a little bit earlier. And however, he loved to draw, constantly doodling, mostly pictures of Sonic. I'm sure you don't have any doodlers, but I did. I had a big class of doodlers this year. And this student did everything I asked when we were looking into our student profiles. He learned about himself. He was super curious. It really piqued his interest. And he ended up choosing a strategy that was his strength. And it was with the visual part, as you can imagine, because he's a good drawer. And he used it regularly to help him learning in all areas. The suggestion that MindPrint gave him was to use his stronger visual reasoning skills, use imagery, visualization, and drawing pictures can help with the memory. And it seemed to fit him perfectly. So he was all in on this. He brought his own little sketch pad in, and he was like taking notes for every single subject. He was much more focused. It was one of those where you could like hit the button and it would clear the screen. And he was very serious about it. He's like, I need to bring this to school. I'm going to bring it tomorrow. I think I'm going to write about this in writing and this in math. And he was all about it. So he was in charge of his own learning now. All of a sudden he shifted over and his scores really improved. And he would even come up to me and just share some of the things he wrote down. And you could just see he was in the driver's seat now. He wanted to be the learner. He had a strategy that he knew would help him. And he was taking something that he enjoyed doing, which was that drawing piece, but connecting it to what we were learning. So it was just fun to see him take ownership over his learning and really put himself in the driver's seat. It wasn't my teacher is teaching and here I am and this is good enough. It was my teacher is teaching and it's my job to make sure I remember this stuff. So I better get to work. So he was a fun success story that I wanted to share. And you can switch to the next slide. So kind of looking forward into how I feel this can improve my teaching later on. My grade level, we really want to continue trying to use this MindPrint data again. And in our mind, you know, the earlier, the better. We just feel that the beginning of the year challenge that I discussed earlier about getting to know your kids and that timeline could be really shortened dramatically if we have those MindPrint results. Even if we got other grade levels on board and if students took the assessment prior to 5th grade, we could get the appropriate groupings in place and have less trial and error, guesswork, you know, almost immediately. And I know this isn't foolproof, right? Nothing really is, but I think it's a much better measurement. And I'm not sure about your schools, but where I work, we have vertical meetings. And we do these at the end of each year where we discuss students. You know, we meet with 4th grade to learn about our incoming 5th graders. And then we meet with 6th grade to give them some insight on what's headed their way. And I kind of feel sad to say that sometimes these conversations turn into more of like a blame game or a complaint session, that conversation or, you know, that these conversations turn into things that sound like, well, this kid isn't really smart, but or he's really smart, but his effort isn't there. Or this kid missed so many days of school. How is he supposed to learn anything? And I'm sure maybe you've had some similar conversations. But I'm a true believer that, no student wants to do bad. They don't wake up like, woo, can't wait to go make my teacher's day horrible and go fail that math quiz, right? So I think it's just powerful for them to be able to know more about how they learn and how they best process things. If they know their visual memory is lacking and they know a strategy to help with that, how uplifting for them. Sometimes that, traditional school setting isn't conducive to learning for all students. And I'm sure since you're sitting in this webinar, you already know that and do things with your students to help them thrive. But having this cognitive science information about your students and really learning more about how they learn can really help leverage that, which is so exciting to think about. So we've talked for years that we all learn differently and there are different kinds of smart. But I think that this experience has really taken the mystery out of that, right? Before it seemed like such an abstract concept, but now it's more concrete, even more powerful, especially for those students that school just doesn't come easy for. The students can see that they do have learning strengths, and they might not be the same as their best friend, but how cool is that they aren't the same? Because there's a lot of power in being different and being able to help each other. And as the teacher, we can create that culture within our classrooms. So my hope moving forward is that our grade level teams, we can just use this MindPrint information to make our vertical conversations more focused and proactive, and that we can pinpoint some simple strategies that are easy to implement from day one that just strengthen that teacher-learner experience and relationship. So that's my stuff.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Andrea. I mean, I had so many questions I was going to ask you. You just kept answering them as we were going along. And I really want to make the time for Leah to share her experience too. But I love what you said about, how cool is it that we don't learn the same, right? Like, and understanding what that is to empower students. And I just have to think about like all your fifth grade teachers. I mean, all your fifth grade students heading into middle school, having a little bit more of a pep to their step as they enter middle school, knowing that they understand who they are as learners and can carry that strength and those skills into middle school. So what a gift that you've given them. So and the rest of your fifth grade teachers. So thank you for sharing that experience. And I want to go ahead and segue it over to Leah now, and then make sure that we have some time for questions too. So audience, if you have additional time, we would love to stay on with you a little bit longer and answer any questions that you have, because these teachers are sharing some really powerful stuff that they're doing in the classroom. So please stay on if you can. All right, Leah, go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was amazing.
Yes, well done, Andrea. A lot of the things that Andrea said will probably align to what was similar in my classroom as well. So, Melissa, do you want to go to my first slide, or is my computer frozen? There we go. Awesome. So I'm Leah Frederick. I teach fourth grade math and science in Bellwood, Pennsylvania. Just a little bit of a background. I didn't always just teach math and science. I actually taught kindergarten. I taught preschool, 2 years of kindergarten, and then I moved up to fourth grade. I love it in fourth grade. My first year, though, in fourth grade, we were all self-contained. So I taught all content areas, and that's when I was introduced to the Modern Classrooms project. And since then, I have utilized the Modern Classrooms project in my math classroom specifically. And because of that, when we decided to departmentalize, they said, Leah, we're going to keep you math so that you can keep using your blended learning instructional model for math instruction, because I was having such a high success rate with it. And so I've been using that model now for about 4 or 5 years, and I haven't turned back. Now that kind of brings me a little bit to my story with MindPrint as well. So I have a master's degree in something called mass customized learning, which is creating radically learner-centered environments. I'm all about putting the kids in the driver's seat and empowering them to take charge of their learning. When I learned about Modern Classrooms project, my principal was like, you are perfect for this. So I know that Rob had talked about how they empower teachers, which is true, but I also feel the model empowers students as well. And with that being said, that brought on the MindPrint piece for me. So one of the challenges I see every school year with fourth grade, specifically academic challenge, is fact fluency. I always tell them the first day of fourth grade math, if you don't know your multiplication facts, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to be in trouble, buddy. So we do a lot of drills and practice with fact fluency. And every year I'm like, why? Well, I don't understand. Like, where is this? What can I be doing better? What could I be doing better to help service these kids so that they can understand this? Not that not knowing them to automaticity is a problem. It's just an extra step for them, especially in fourth grade math when it gets even more challenging. So I came up with some strategies in my classroom already. So we already know a lot about how everyone's brain is different. And, you know, we talk about learning styles. But the problem for me was when you ask the kids, well, what's your preferred learning style? Do you like visual multiplication cards, like that subitizing card I have pictured? Or do you like, you know, the numbered multiplication cards? They really can't tell you because they're not really sure. I don't know if I'm a visual learner. I don't know if I need to do that. I know what I like, but they couldn't really tell me how their brain worked. So whenever I heard about MindPrint, I was like, oh, this is exciting. I thought it was really fascinating to be able to give some type of assessment to my kids to figure out how their brain is working so that I can better utilize their strengths so that I can support them with math in the classroom. Now, one of the interesting things is whenever they took their MindPrint tests, I will say we had one little hiccup. My whole entire school was on iPads, and we found this cart of these old laptops, and I brought them in, and the kids were super excited because they haven't seen a laptop because they needed a mouse for some of the tests. And some of these kids go, Miss Frederick, what's a mouse? What's a space bar? And so I had to do a little bit of learning with them so that they understood like where a space bar was, how to use it, how to use the mouse pad on that. But what was interesting was after we got all of the data back from MindPrint, of all of the things that my students, in particular in third and fourth grade, needed the most support in was memory. And I thought, it's all coming together. Maybe this is part of the reason why they're having such a hard time figuring out their facts for math class. And maybe I should work on some strategies to help support them with their memory. So that will bring me to my next slide, Melissa, which would be using my data. So MindPrint gave us lots of valuable data. I know Andrea had already shown some pictures and examples of it, so I didn't feel it was necessary to share all of mine. But my focus mainly was on that memory piece and how I can support them. Now, I find that a lot of the strategies MindPrint offered for my students to support their memory aligned with other components of how their brain works. So like Andrea said, she had a learner who doodled all the time. Well, I took that to my advantage. So for example, I had one student and same thing, Andrea, he's a doodler, man. And part of the modern classrooms model encourages guided notes and note taking. And so I said to this student, I said, I want you to try something different. Instead of the note-taking page that Miss Frederick gives you, I want you to make your own notes, however your brain sees them, like maybe draw some pictures. And he made these very extensive, like bubble drawings of a big division sign and like little models to help him remember divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And I let him, continue to do that throughout the year. And it really helped him because he was able to connect the learning to the drawing that he had made with his doodle notes, as opposed to the types of notes that I had given him. Another strategy that MindPrint offered was graph paper. Now, I had been familiar with graph paper before as a math teacher for multiplication and long division, but not for other math concepts. And this was incredibly helpful for a lot of them. just to organize their thoughts and to keep everything in order. And some of the kids, very similar to my visual learner, they were able to use that graph paper on the standardized testing. They're like, Ms. Frederick, I can't use this plain white paper. Can you please give me the graph paper so that I can remember how to do these things? And of course, I gave them the graph paper. And so on top of doing things such as the doodle notes and the graph paper, we did a lot of memory games in my classroom and then tied it to math. And so, for example, I don't know if any of you teachers have ever played, I'm going to the beach and I'm bringing with me a towel. I'm bringing with me a towel and sandals, a towel, sandals, sunglasses, so on and so forth. So we would play all these memory games. And at the end, we tried to make it very meaningful. I would ask them, how were you able to remember that giant list of things we took to the beach? And we started to very explicitly teach the kids, well, I did, about how we can connect words to pictures or words to words, words to motion. So for example, when we learned to long divide, we had a dance, divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And it was amazing to me, especially during standardized testing, when I was walking around doing my observations, that I would see them in their seats like divide, multiply. So they were starting to figure out strategies to improve their memory to help them with the math. And the student response to all of these extra pieces for me was incredible. I really loved whenever I would work with a small group and the kids would say, Miss Frederick, my brain doesn't see it that way. Can we try something different? And we would try something different. Or the other kids would help each other. I've had kids say, I know my brain sees it this way. Will it help you? So that was like just incredible, I thought, especially because, kids teaching other kids. And finally, one of the other great ways I was able to use the data that MindPrint provided us was with an IEP or a case study meeting. So Melissa, you can go to the next slide there. We had a learner in 4th grade this year who we had to do a CST, a case study on. She doesn't have an IEP or anything, but we were really concerned about her reading. Now, I do not teach reading. I do not teach ELA at all, but they asked me to be part of the meeting anyways, since I was her math and science teacher. And I mean, there's still reading in math and science. You have story problems and evidence-based things in science that you have to read. So I was at the meeting and I thought, oh my goodness, I have this MindPrint data on how her brain works. I think this would be fantastic to take to this meeting. And so I took it with me. And of all of the things, when I finally sat down and looked at it, I was like, oh my goodness, her skill to support is something with verbal reasoning and just the needs that she had based on that CST. I was like, this makes perfect sense. Now, since I don't teach her ELA, I didn't get a chance to be a part of the learning plan that was going to be put in place for her. Unfortunately, the learning plan fell through anyways because the parents decided they didn't want that for their child. But being able to take this data that MindPrint gave me to these meetings was impactful because we could then use it to be able to say, as part of their IEP, we can try this, or as part of their plan, maybe we can implement this in the classroom for them. So just having the evidence to support and back that up was really meaningful to us here. Well, that brings me then to my end. So you can go to my last slide there, Melissa. That way we have some time for questions. Moving forward, I know that visual note taking and the graph paper were only 2 of the biggest examples, our biggest like influential pieces that happened in my classroom this year, but MindPrint offered so many more. I kind of referred to this as leveled up differentiation. And I put a picture of my game board from my Modern Classrooms project model in here too for a reason. I feel like teachers are really good at figuring out how to differentiate a lesson as far as making it easy, medium, hard, if you will. Like I'm good at making the lesson easy and a kid who can do it a little bit harder and then the kid who could do it hardest. That's something I feel really skilled in. But being able to use the MindPrint data helped me level up that differentiation. So If it's 3 kids working on the hard lesson, I can level that up by saying, well, this kid's brain is going to see this lesson with doodle notes, and this kid's brain is going to see this different with handwritten paper notes, and this kid's going to take oral notes, like maybe he's going to talk into his iPad. So the leveled up differentiation is exactly how I see this, especially because a lot of us teachers with our teaching philosophy, we always know and say every child's brain is different. And with my Modern Classrooms project, we talk about that all the time. Learning's a journey, not a race, and how we all have to learn it at our own pace. And so adding that piece is awesome. And I think the other cool thing I'm going to try to do for next year is really do purposeful, explicit instruction on all of the strategies. So for example, like the memory games, I wanted them to understand that we weren't playing the memory game. Well, we were playing it for fun, but we were playing it for fun for a purpose. So being able to tell them, we played this game so that I could understand and you could understand that you remembered better with a picture in your head. You remembered better by connecting a word to a word. Bella, umbrella, you know. So being very explicit with teaching a lot of these strategies is part of my goal for next year. And I would love to take the strategies and somehow incorporate them into my learning pathway. Or I have a Google site that parents have access to as well. And I would love to add a page on there where I would just talk to them a little bit more about, here are some strategies you can try with your child at home to improve their math understanding. But my experience was wonderful. MindPrint was wonderful. Modern Classrooms has been influential in my classroom, and I do plan to continue these practices into the next year.
That was amazing, Leah. I was thinking about it. That was actually a perfect segue, because one of the questions was like, can you talk a little bit about, and I'm going to stop sharing now, so if the rest of the panel and everybody in the room wants to join us so we can have a candid conversation with our audience. But one of the questions was like, how do you use this as a parent tool? Like, have you used this in parent teacher conferences? What does that conversation look like? You know, is it helpful for the parents? Like, have they come back to you and said, oh my gosh, like I kept, you know, going after my kid, they need flashcards, and that's not really, it's not a benefit to my kid, you know, to use these like number flashcards or these word flashcards. They need something, you know, different. So can you speak to a little bit, either one of you want to speak to that and how you've used it for parent communication?
So I'll be honest, I didn't get a whole lot of opportunity to do a bunch of parent communication as far as the MindPrint data this year. Again, on my plans for next year, especially with my classroom site. Having said that, I was able to use it, like you said, especially with the flashcards. You know, they're not understanding with these. So then I'd say, well, let's try chunking. So one of the MindPrint strategies was chunking, where I would say, let's master the 2s. And then once you master the 2s, let's start doing the 3s, but don't get rid of the 2s, you know. So being able to give the individualized instruction that way, whenever the parent questions came up, was really, really great. By the time I had done the MindPrint tests, our fall conferences were over, so I couldn't really bring up too much to speak to at the fall conference. And our spring conferences, unfortunately, are very like hit and miss. We usually only get a couple kids that come into those. So I didn't get to talk too much there. But when the individual questions arose, I was able to use that data to come up with different ways to help the parents at home.
Awesome. Andrea, what about your experience?
I kind of briefly mentioned that they had the handouts that said how adults can help with, and then this particular. So I printed out those to give to families, and I sent those home. And then I kind of like highlighted the strategies that I thought were easy to implement and then probably most beneficial. I also, like Leah, our spring, I didn't have the data for the fall conferences where we meet with everybody. Spring conference is invitation only. So, but I did send home their MindPrint profile with every kid. And I made like a little video for my parents on how to read it and what to do with that information. Some were, you know, it was a range. It was, some were like, okay, probably never even looked at it. Some of them looked at it, but were like, okay, cool, but didn't do much with it. And then I had a few parents that like dug in and wanted to know more. And like I gave them their student login information so they could log into their student's profile too and see the strengths and suggested strategies. And I know some started implementing a few things at home, but not very many. But I think the more comfortable I get with all the strategies and learning the ins and outs of all these different cognitive science areas, that the more I can better tailor my assistance to home as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and I'm listening to you guys, and I'm thinking about Modern Classrooms Project's mission about making teachers happier, and students gain mastery. And so I'm thinking about the fact that, and Andrea, or Leah, maybe you both said it, but was, you know, as teachers that are on this call, like, you know, the strategies, right? Like they're strategies that we use all the time. But I think what's leveled up, in using Leah's language, what's leveling it up is like, which strategies to use with which students, right? Or like, how do I group these students, and not in an academic way, but in like based on their cognitive profile, right? Based on their strengths and their needs. And so it seems like, I mean, I saw you guys smile quite a bit. It seems like you're a little bit happier having this data. But what I really loved hearing was just those anecdotes and those stories of your students saying like, well, my brain doesn't work like that. Like, I mean, I know kids with IEPs that like have advocacy goals that are, you know, 16 years old and just learning to do that. And you guys are doing it in elementary school, which is so powerful when you think about how that's going to be carried throughout their educational experience, right? And how much it makes them feel known too. And I think, Andrea, you pointed this out, is like those kids that struggle in school, like finally hearing like, you have strengths, like, look at this paper doesn't lie, like these are your strengths, you know, and just like how much that leveled up their feeling about school and their engagement, right? So I know we have a few questions. Vicki, do you want to go ahead and dive into those really quick? We've got about 10 minutes. So
Sure, yeah. So that one about parent, how we share with parents was one of the questions. And I'll also add that a lot of teachers like to share the student-facing version of the profile with families because it's a strength-based view of that student's profile. Andrea had some screenshots of the MindPrint profile, which has the student skills in statistically significant buckets and is a nice deep dive. The student profile is the profile we suggest sharing with students because it is strength-based. They're seeing their MindPrint skills in order of strength relative to themselves. And the parent and the families also can use that as a very actionable report because the strategies link directly. So some of those images of the strategies that you saw in Leah and Andrea's slides link directly from that report. So it gives families some really quick kind of actionable things to do at home to help with homework, let's say, or organization. So that's a view from other schools and teachers as well. And let's see, there was another question. What is the best way to introduce this to teachers who are reluctant to look at more data?
fair question. There's so much data, right?
Right.
What do you
First,
guys-
I'll actually pause and see if Andrea or Leah, you have a perspective on that because you had the experience with the data.
All like my team is so not like that, which I adore about them and I'm very thankful for. However, I do know that's a concern. I know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's suggested that they only take this assessment once every 3 years. So it's not like you're going to be looking at new sets of data all the time, that same data will follow the kids for, you know, a good chunk of time. But I would just go back to the like, don't you want to know what's going on inside that brain of theirs? Like that, I think a teacher sometime throughout their career has totally said that phrase, right? And so it's like, here's the window. Let's look inside. That would be my one thing to really try to maybe drive them home.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do have a teacher on my team who would be like, no, I'm done. I don't want any more data. I'm done. So I'm like trying to think of ways that I would convince her to check it out. I think one of the great things is MindPrint kind of did a lot of the work for me. So like I just had to administer the test and it was like, boom, here's all your data. And even in my toolbox, like it grouped the kids for me already. So it's kind of like I didn't have to do too much as far as like the grouping and figuring out all of that stuff because MindPrint did it for me. And one of the cool things I liked about it too was that it would have like a suggestion for learning. So it's almost like if you had like a no special day or something, you could take one of those strategies and it says like group A, group B, and like put them in those groups and have them work on that strategy together or something. So just I would say like, you know, technology now is so impactful and it's able to do a lot for us that will help us in the classroom. So I think using that as a motivational piece to try it and then just knowing like it really, you know, as far as more data for you to look at, it's nice that most of it's all done for you. So it's not like I have to sit down and figure it all out. It's just here's a quick snapshot of everything and to really target in on some of those kids who you are like most concerned about as you start and then move into like maybe some more whole group things. Baby steps. That's what I even tell my modern classrooms mentees. Baby steps, one step at a time.
There was one final question, unless anybody has any additional comments, is like, will there be, you guys participated in a pilot program. Will there be another pilot program? Like, how do I find out more information about that? I don't know if that's a question for Ifrat or Robert or who would like to answer that.
I can go ahead and jump in. At this time,
Okay.
we're not continuing the pilot, but if you're interested in learning more about Modern Classrooms project, or if you're interested in learning more about MindPrint, I know, Melissa, you put up our emails on that last slide, but it'll also just be one of those post-webinar resources.
Fantastic. Well, we've already gone over almost 15 minutes over time, and so we're so appreciative of everybody being here. And oh, it looks like one last question popped up. Looking at it from an EALLS teacher, we could be using these strategies during the pull-out classes, and the math teacher will be giving a different strategy. And I'm not sure if I understand the question. Do you see it, Leah?
I do see it. Using the strategies during pull-out classes. I would say you probably could use these strategies during pull-out classes. I feel like you could use them during any class, whether it's pull-out, intervention, or whole group, because I used it during my whole group math instruction, as well as small group, as well as one-on-one. So I would say whatever would best meet the needs of your learner is how you could use it. So I would say, yes, you could do it that way.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. Leah and Andrea, you guys were amazing. I can't thank you enough for participating and sharing your wisdom and just your experience with our audience here today. And I always learn something from these webinars. And so I'm so appreciative of our educators that are in the field doing the hard work. Robert, thank you for joining us as well, and the great work that you're doing at Modern Classrooms Project, and my colleagues Ifrat and Vicky, always my amazing colleagues that put all this together. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week. I know, Leah, this is your last day of school, right? Or is it tomorrow?
Tomorrow, it's a half day.
Amazing, amazing. I mean, just like in true form of a teacher, like squeezing it all into the last minute. Super appreciate that. Thank you, audience, for joining us today. And if you have additional questions regarding Modern Classrooms Project or MindPrint Learning, you'll be receiving that in the follow-up email next week. Thank you, everyone, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.